Today, as the United States faces the longest government shutdown in its history, with ripples affecting not just federal workers, but U.S. troops stationed abroad, our alliances strained, our global security imperiled. From Ramstein Air Base in Germany to the precarious stalemate in Iran's nuclear program, the questions we face are not just procedural, they are existential. What does it mean for America's credibility when our allies from Germany to Japan are forced to pick up the tab for U.S. operational readiness? How do internal political stalemates affect deterrence, operational readiness, and crisis response? And as emerging powers reshape the Indo-Pacific through tariffs, trade, and military posturing, what lessons from past administrations can guide us through the present uncertainty? Today, I'm joined by a man whose fingerprints are etched across the most consequential chapters of modern American national security, former Secretary of Defense, former CIA Director, and veteran public servant Leon Panetta. Secretary Panetta has been in the Situation Room for the most turbulent moments of the 21st century. He has been in the room where decisions were made that have shaped not just our security, but our values. From counterterrorism operations in the Middle East to managing the intricacies of NATO alliances to navigating the internal politics of the Pentagon during fiscal crises. Secretary Panetta, thank you for being on the Political Mic today.
It's good to be with you, Mike. You've got a lot of interesting things and challenges that are facing our country right now. It's a good time to have this chat.
I couldn't agree more, sir. We're seeing the United States government shutdown stretch into historic territory. We're in the 42nd day. Reports indicate that Germany has been covering salaries for thousands of local staff supporting U.S. troops. From your perspective, Mr. Secretary, how do such domestic political stalemates affect United States military readiness and credibility abroad?
Well, look, if you want to send a message of weakness to our adversaries and to our allies, it's for the United States to have a dysfunctional government in Washington. And right now, we've got a dysfunctional government. We're in a shutdown. We hope that it'll end soon. But the fact that the political parties, Democrats and Republicans, and the president were unable to come together and avoid a shutdown tells us a lot about whether our democracy can function properly. Because when you shut down the government, you're shutting down, pay to our military, although they found some ways to get around it. It's a terrible approach. It impacts on our defense budget, not only here, but around the world. It makes clear that we are unable to be able to respond to crisis where, both parties can really work together to govern this country. And it says a lot about our ability to not deal with the budget. We right now in this country have a national debt of $37 trillion. One of the biggest debts we've ever had in the history of our country. We're paying more on interest on that debt right now, $2 trillion almost, more than what we spend on defense, more than what we spend in Medicare and healthcare programs. We're spending more on just paying down that debt. So the combination of a fiscal situation that's out of control, plus the inability of both political parties to be able to work together to govern this country, I think sends a terrible message to the world about the stability and, frankly, trust of the American people right now.
And Mr. Secretary, in your experience, what are the long-term operational risks to U.S. forces when civilian personnel are furloughed and funding uncertainty persists? Could delayed paychecks or pause training exercises ripple into broader strategic vulnerabilities?
Well, look, we're talking about, let's just look at the Pentagon. Pentagon, we've got 3 million people at the Pentagon, 2 million in uniform, men and women in uniform. But we have 1 million civilians that are there as well. And so if you suddenly face some kind of crisis, And clearly, I think our military is in a position to try to respond to crisis should it happen. But to be able to deploy, to be able to move equipment, to be able to basically make sure that we're fully prepared to deal with any kind of crisis, you need to have a federal government that's operating, not only in terms of transportation, not only in terms of other employees, not only in terms of the support systems that you need, but also in terms of your sheer ability to be able to get people to move when they have to deploy quickly when they have to. So it's if I was Secretary of Defense and faced a crisis in the middle of a shutdown, I'd be very worried about our ability to quickly respond. That's what I would report to the president. I mean, you can say we're in an emergency. We can say that we'll use people regardless of the fact we're in a shutdown, and I think we would have to do that. But the reality is, because of the support system that you need in order to be able to do what you have to do, that support system is being seriously impacted by the shutdown. I mean, just look at travel alone and what it's doing to travel in this country, and how many flights have been canceled, and how many people have obviously not been able to go where they have to go in order to do things. So it's a lousy way to do business, okay? It's a lousy way to do business.
And Germany's exceptional measures to support U.S. personnel highlight both goodwill and frustration. Historically, how has the United States maintained allied trust during periods of domestic political dysfunction like what we're experiencing right now?
Well, normally the way you would do this is that you would have, obviously, both our military and diplomatic corps that are assigned abroad. You would have them being able to sit down and reassure our allies that despite whatever problems we're having in this country, that we are paying attention to our national security needs, that we're paying attention to our diplomatic needs, and that the government still can stand by any commitments we have to those allies that we work with. That's normally the way it would work. In this administration, since they've basically cut back on our diplomatic side, since they've cut back, obviously, on the civilian side in terms of our civilian workforce, and the fact that they've used the shutdown to even, move further to implement cutbacks, to fire people, and to take steps to really undermine kind of that support system that's there. I don't know just how effectively they're able to reassure our allies that the United States is still in business.
And of course, the Democratic group that came together, 8 senators, have been getting a lot of heat for coming together with Republicans this week to negotiate a deal that requires there to be a vote in December about the extended Affordable Care Act credits. A lot of folks have said, well, what was the point of having this long shutdown and making the stalemate if you were going to cave in and capitulate so easily? And then you have some folks even calling for a removal of Senator Chuck Schumer from Senate minority leadership. What are your views about what just took place this week? Do those folks have valid concerns that Democrats caved in too early and got too little for it, and that there should be a change in leadership?
Well, look, I've been through a lot of shutdowns in the time over 50 years that I've been in public life. I've seen a lot of shutdowns. Most of the shutdowns that I saw lasted maybe 2 or 3 days. Why? Because both parties were working at it. Both parties were negotiating. The president was interested in trying to make sure that we didn't have a shutdown, and they were able to resolve those issues. In this instance, you know, the House of Representatives basically shut down. The Speaker took the House of Representatives and sent them home. So there clearly was no there on the House side. On the Senate side, they were still open. They were still trying to work. But even there, they were having, you know, serious problems being able to work out any approach that might work. And so we had the longest shutdown in the history of our country. And my concern is that a lot of people were hurt. When you have a shutdown, you know, my experience is nobody wins when you have a shutdown, and the country is hurt. And so in this shutdown, we had people who needed assistance. I mean, the whole program to try to provide food to people that need food with food stamps and SNAP, to have people having to go hungry because of the cutbacks, and an administration and a president that basically didn't care. You know, they really didn't do what they said you would think they would do, which is to provide a backup support system to help feed people. We had, as I said, federal employees that were out of work and out of pay. We had planes that were not flying and travel that was being interrupted. And our economy was being impacted. We got an economy that's shaky to begin with inflation and increased costs. So it's, you know, a lot of people were getting hurt. So I can understand why some members felt that they had to try to sit down, try to see if they could negotiate some kind of approach. They were able, you know, to work out a deal on 3 appropriations bills, including SNAP. They were able to make sure that federal employees would be rehired. They were able to make sure that other steps were taken to try to make clear that the government would kind of live up to its promises to the people that were impacted. And on healthcare, you know, while I agree with the fact that healthcare costs are going to increase dramatically as a result of these subsidies not being there, it was also clear to me that the president didn't care a lot about that program. And he certainly didn't indicate any willingness to try to do something to help cover those tremendous increasing costs in healthcare. They don't have a plan. I wish they could have resolved it in this package. I can understand why it was tough to do. But you know what? That issue is not going away. There'll be another fight on that. We'll have a vote in December. We'll have a continuing issue on health care. If the Republicans are not willing to deal with that issue, if the president not willing to deal with that issue, that will be a major issue in the election next year, a major issue. And so the issue hasn't gone away. I think it makes sense right now to kind of move on, get the government open, and then roll up your sleeves and be prepared to fight again, because you will have a fight on your hands on healthcare. You will have a fight on your hands in January when we face another possible shutdown. So those opportunities haven't gone away. And in the meantime, I think we can try to at least do something to make sure that our country is not damaged either morally or financially.
Yeah. As someone who's been in the Situation Room for some of our most tumultuous moments, especially in this new century, what are your thoughts when you see images of ICE agents going into places of worship and schools and other public settings and manhandling and being rough with those who are vulnerable, those who are suspected of being here without the proper documentation? You're seeing a rise in Trump's use of what it seems to be military tactics of taking over cities like Los Angeles and going into cities like Portland, with the pretext of it being for law and order. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I find it all very disturbing and very scary. I'm the son of Italian immigrants. My parents came here like millions of others, with not a lot of money in their pocket, but with a lot of hope that ultimately they could provide a better life for their children. And that's the American dream. This is the land of immigrants, regardless of what Trump thinks. This is the land of immigrants. That's what the Statue of Liberty is all about in New York Harbor. And we are a country that has drawn people from every part of the world. And that's our strength. That's our strength as a country, is the fact that we are made up of different people of different creeds and faiths and looks and appearances and countries. That is what makes the fiber of America strong, because we are a great country of immigrants. Now, look, nobody wants our immigration system not to work. And our immigration system has not worked. But to respond to the immigration system, you don't just focus on the border issue. You focus on every element of our immigration system. When I was in Congress in the 80s in the Reagan administration, we passed comprehensive immigration reform. I sat down with both Democrats and Republicans and the administration. We negotiated an approach, we agreed on it, and we passed it with a bipartisan vote. It dealt with border security. It dealt with a work program for those that need to find work. It dealt with penalties for employers who hired people who were not legal. It dealt with legalization of those that are here illegally. We did all of that, and it worked. And frankly, we should have comprehensive immigration. I think Democrats, frankly, ought to be standing up and supporting comprehensive immigration reform. You know, Trump, if he's really serious about dealing with this, he ought to be supporting comprehensive immigration reform. But just to send ICE out like a bunch of Gestapo agents going after people and really creating a situation where it really undermines, frankly, law and order when they behave that way. It undermines law and order. That's not what our law enforcement people do. That's not what our agents do. They don't abuse people. So I think that there's a way to deal with that, and we should. I think that as a former Secretary of Defense, I believe that our military is trained to fight foreign adversaries. It's about protecting our national security.
Right.
We're not supposed to use them for law enforcement purposes. We have a statute, the Posse Comitatus statute, that makes clear that you don't use the military for law enforcement.
Right.
And so, my view is if you want to deal with law enforcement issues, fine. Increase the police, increase support for law enforcement, increase the ability to be able to give local and community law enforcement the resources they need to be able to do their job. But you don't just send the National Guard in. You don't just send the military in.
Yeah.
What you need to do is provide for a more permanent solution to law and order in our country. And that's what he should be focused on. So I'm offended by the fact that he thinks he can just somehow use the military as his own personal toy.
Yeah.
That's not what our Constitution provides.
Yeah.
That's not what this country is about. You ought to learn to respect the people who are in uniform. Our men and women in uniform are there to protect our national security.
Right.
Period.
And if we were to go back in time to last year, Donald Trump told Republican congressional allies of his not to vote for the Republican written border bill proposed by James Langford of Oklahoma.
That's right.
Whereas his opponent, Vice President Harris, put her weight behind that bill and said, if she were the commander in chief, she would sign that bill. I don't think that's being mentioned enough. I don't, even hear any mention of the Langford border bill. This was a majority Republican wish bill that would have received Democratic support and would have been a first step in the direction of actually solving the border crisis. But to tank it and still look at where we are in November and not even bring it back up for a vote, to me conveys that it was never about the border crisis at all. It was all about using it as a wedge issue to get votes.
Yeah. No, it was. I thought it really conveyed a very bad message when we have Republicans and Democrats willing to work together on a compromise. There's agreement. It clearly was going to be able to pass and to address some of the issues we were concerned about on immigration reform. And the presidential candidate for the Republican Party basically said to Republicans, don't support it because we need it as an issue in the campaign. We elect people to put the country ahead of the party. That's what they're supposed to do. We elect people to go back to Washington to govern and try to deal with the issues our democracy is facing. Not to go back there and simply jump into a trench and throw grenades at the other party or pound their shoe on the table. We elect them to go back to govern. And when a presidential candidate basically sends a clear message that he doesn't care about the fact that they were able to resolve these issues and work out an agreement, doesn't care about that, tells me that he really doesn't care about abiding by the rule of law and abiding by our Constitution. That's what presidents are supposed to do.
And even going back to your earlier point about how he trivializes the military, what were your thoughts about this past summer's military parade to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Army?
Well, again, I think I believe that the United States, in terms of our military, has always had the greatest respect for young people who were willing to put on the uniform of our country and go to war on behalf of our country and put their lives on the line and fight and die if necessary to protect our country. And that's why we celebrated Veterans Day, is because we appreciate the fact that there are those that were willing to serve this country. There were those who died in the service of this country. But we always do it on the basis that we are a country of free people who understand the importance of our freedoms and our values and what we're about as a country: respect for each other and respect for the rule of law. And we've never taken the position that our government should be a militaristic power. We don't have to replicate what Russia does when they march their forces on May 1. We don't have to replicate autocracies in the world like North Korea that march their missiles through North Korea. Because the reason they do it is because they are not a democracy. They don't favor individual freedom. They don't favor the values that we support. And so they want to show the world that somehow they can produce that kind of power. Well, we here in the United States have never had to do that. Let me tell you something. We are strong. we're strong enough to take on any enemy, any adversary, if we have to. But we also don't flaunt that power. We use it if we have to. We respect the people that have to serve if they need to. But we all understand that we are, first and foremost, the land of the free. And that it's important that we respect the individuals in this country, regardless of color, creed, or faith, respect each other. Because I'll tell you, when it comes to strength, that's the greatest strength we have.
And this past summer, Donald Trump made the decision to issue military strikes against Iran. That, of course, caused a flurry of criticism against him, and also some praise on the right. Now, in light of the fact that we've been taken out of the Iran nuclear deal thanks to Donald Trump's first term, and there was a tense stalemate emerging between Iran and Israel, how would you assess the current calculus, the risk calculus of the Gulf, as a result of his actions this past summer? And from a strategic standpoint, what is the most credible way to prevent escalation at this point between Israel and Iran?
Well, look, we live in a dangerous world. Let's not kid ourselves. We live in a dangerous world. And right now, we probably have more flashpoints in the world than we've seen since World War II. We're dealing with Putin and Russia, much more aggressive Russia, and what they're doing in Ukraine is something I didn't think I would again see since Hitler marched into Poland, is to have another tyrant march into a democracy and try to wipe out that sovereign democracy. We've got China threatening to do the same thing in Taiwan. We've got North Korea building a lot of nuclear weapons and having the missiles to deliver those weapons. And we have Iran, which, despite what's happened, the reality, I believe, is that Iran still has enriched fuel, and that Iran may very well continue to do work on developing a nuclear weapon. We made an effort, President Obama made an effort to try to reduce that threat with the agreement on nuclear enrichment. And while there were a lot of people that didn't like it, the reality was that it worked. It worked. Iran paid attention to it, paid attention to the limits. We had inspectors go into Iran and confirm that they were abiding by that agreement. And they, in fact, were not developing enriched fuel at the levels they were in the past. They had cut back. We made progress. And we did it, by the way, with Russia, with Germany, with Great Britain, with France, our allies, working together to develop that agreement. First thing Trump did was to walk away from that agreement. And he didn't really have anything to replace it with. He just said, we're not going to abide by that agreement.
Exactly.
And what that did was it sent a signal to Iran, first of all, that you can't trust the United States. But secondly, that they could go ahead and start enriching fuel, which they did.
Yep.
And that made them a threat. There's no question about it. It made Iran an even greater threat because we were not able to control the level of enrichment or what they were doing in terms of working towards a nuclear weapon. Yeah. So I think it pretty much put us in a place where, because Iran was threatening to move forward, I think that the United States and Israel took the right action with regards to Iran. Iran was sending missiles towards Israel. We knocked down most of those missiles. So they were continuing to be a threat. So I happen to believe that military action in that situation is, served an important purpose of being able to try to restrain Iran. But I also believe that the most effective way to deal with this is to now go back to the negotiating table with Iran and try to again restore the requirements of the past agreement and get them to live within limits. I think this is a good time to do that, by the way. I think both Israel and what the United States did badly weakened Iran. Iran doesn't have the proxy forces that it continued to support. Hezbollah's been damaged. Hamas has been damaged. Iran has been damaged just by virtue of the war. So a lot of the proxy forces that Iran used have been damaged. They're weakened right now. This is actually a very good time to be willing to sit down with Iran and try to see if you can negotiate an agreement that would make clear that they are not to develop a nuclear weapon. That's where I think Trump ought to be focusing right now, is trying to restart those negotiations and try to arrive at some agreement. Because if we don't, I think there's a very good chance that Iran will continue to move forward. And mark my words, we will have another war in Iran if that continues.
And President Trump has framed tariffs not only as an economic tool, but as a national security measure with global repercussions, including the delay of Quad summits. How do you assess the intersection of trade policy and national security? Are there lessons from past administrations on using economic tools as leverage without undermining alliances or strategic credibility?
Well, I think Trump's tariff policy is nuts, to be very frank. And you know what? I think the Supreme Court recognizes that he exceeded his power in using the tariffs to basically, he used them as clubs to go after countries and things they were doing that he didn't like. And that's not what trade policy is all about. Look, we live in a global world. Thank God we live in a global world. We're interconnected, whether we like it or not, by communication, by security, by financial areas. We're connected in many ways by trade. We live in a global world. I believe we ought to be a country that is able to trade freely in that kind of global world. I think free trade, free and fair trade, is what we ought to be aiming for. So that countries, yeah, they're going to produce their products. If they produce good products, we're going to buy them. We should. That's the nature of competition. That's what free enterprise is all about. So I'm a believer that we ought to move towards a free trade kind of approach. He's using these tariffs as a club. And he's using it in a way that, frankly, the Congress did not empower him to be able to use tariffs to raise taxes on the American people, which is exactly what it's done. It's done. That's why we have high inflation in this country. That's why food prices are going up. It's because he's imposed these tariffs. I mean, and he's been very unpredictable. One day he'll say he's going to raise it by 100%. The next day he backs off. It's been a whiplash in terms of policy. And no president, frankly, ought to have that kind of power. No president ought to be able to use the taxing authority that he's done with these tariffs. So my view is be strong, have a strong military, have a strong national security policy, but also don't be afraid to basically build trade agreements with other countries in the world so that we can produce a free and fair trade system that allows the people of every country the ability to buy what they want to buy in order to support their families. That's the kind of world I want to see.
And given the Indo-Pacific's rising strategic importance, what are the risks to U.S. regional influence when tariff disputes and economic friction disrupt multilateral security arrangements like the Quad?
Mike, I told you that I think we live in a dangerous world. I think one of the keys to deal with that dangerous world goes back to what we did coming out of World War II. For 80 years, Republican and Democratic presidents, they may have disagreed on some issues, but when it came to foreign policy, to defense policy, they basically agreed on the same principles. Number one, that the United States ought to provide world leadership. That we're a country that believes in democracy, we have the right values, we can provide world leadership. And we did that. Number two, that we can build alliances in the world, working with our allies. We came out of World War II and established NATO, probably one of the most important alliances we have, to be able to protect us from the threats that came from others. Three, that we respected the use of diplomacy along with our military as our tools to be able to protect our security. And lastly, that we weren't afraid to stand up to tyrants. I mean, Republican and Democratic presidents said it's important to stand up to Putin. It's important to stand up to Xi. It's important to stand up to Kim Jong-un, not to pacify them, not to cower before them, not to send a message of weakness to these autocrats that would wipe out the United States in a minute if they had the opportunity. So I'm a believer in alliances. And I think what we need to do is establish stronger alliances, not weaker alliances. Reinforce NATO, support NATO. NATO's critical to Ukraine succeeding and Putin, frankly, not succeeding. That's critical. In the Middle East, I think we need to build an alliance there with moderate Arab countries. You can use the Abraham Accords as a starter. Bring Israel into it. Build an alliance that can take on terrorism and that can take on Iran if necessary. In Asia, build a strong alliance. We have that with Australia, with South Korea, with Japan, with some of these countries in Southeast Asia. I think we need to build a stronger alliance in the Pacific, in which security becomes a very important part of that. And these countries provide security as well. I think we need to do that in Latin and Central America. I mean, we're threatening to go to war now with Venezuela, and we're doing it like a Hopalong Cassidy, without any, using any of our friends and basically bullying our way in that part of the world. That's the wrong way to deal, very frankly, with Central and Latin America. We ought to be building alliances, security alliances, working with countries in that part of the world to not only control the narcotics trade, but to also build free trade and build security for all of the countries. And Africa, frankly, is another place where we ought to be building an alliance, working with African nations to be able to protect Africa as it moves forward in the 21st century. So that's what I think is the key to being able to protect our security, but more importantly, to protect the security of the world, is to have the United States as a world leader working with other countries to build strong alliances.
And Mr. Secretary, there was a retired U.S. colonel who publicly accused the Biden administration of minimizing evidence that Israeli forces intentionally killed Shirin Abu Ackley, who was an American journalist. He called it a lack of action and even a cover-up. Having led both the CIA and the Pentagon, what would accountability look like when the alleged perpetrator is actually one of our closest allies?
Well, I think it's very important that the United States has to stand by the rule of law. The president raises his right hand, as does every elected official, and swears an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And that is the standard that we as a country needs to have in order to show the world that we are a country that believes in our Constitution, believes in the rule of law, and believes in the value of every individual and the importance of every individual. And so when things happen, and they've happened in past administrations, I think we have to be the first to stand up and be able to say a serious mistake was made. We've got to correct it, and we've got to make sure that it never happens again. We've made our share of mistakes. There's no question about it. But I think the great thing about our country is our ability to recognize our mistakes and to basically make clear that we're not going to repeat those mistakes in the past. I was just at a veterans event here in Monterey to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, the end of the Vietnam War. And I said to the veterans that were there that in many ways, the Vietnam War was a very tragic war because first, it was not popular. Military and civilian leaders made mistakes, and we did not tell the truth to the American people. At the same time, I think Vietnam was a heroic war because there were men in uniform that went to war, followed orders, fought, and died for this country. And those 58,000 members are etched in stone at the memorial, Vietnam Memorial in Washington. And they're a symbol that we are a country where people from every part of this country will stand up and protect what our country is all about when called upon. So they were heroes. They weren't treated as heroes, but they were really heroes in following and fighting for this country. So, yeah, we can make mistakes, and we will. But we can also be people who will stand up and do the right thing when it counts. And I hope today in particular that whoever this president is, and whoever we've elected to the Congress, that they will be strong enough to stand up and do the right thing.
Mr. Secretary, you've often said that in intelligence work, secrecy is necessary, but it can never become an excuse for abuse. When we see allegations that a private financier like Jeffrey Epstein was facilitating relationships between Israeli and U.S. intelligence figures, what does it tell us about how blurred the line is between private wealth and statecraft?
Yeah. Well, it's an issue that we've got to be very aware of because unfortunately there are people of wealth who are going to try to have their way no matter what the hell happens. They're going to try to avoid laws. They're going to try to do things that they think they can get away with. And my view is that if we are really a country of laws, that we aren't going to hesitate to stop people from doing that and to prosecute those that try to do that and try to break the law. And those lines get very fuzzy sometimes, and I think they're very fuzzy right now. I think there are things that this White House is doing that frankly are scandalous. and are corrupt. And I think there are things that obviously a lot goes on that of people being able to buy their way, of people who are able to sell their soul in order to get what they want. But we've been through these situations in the past. I'm a believer in American leadership. We've been through a hell of a lot of crises. We're celebrating our 250th anniversary as a country. We've been through a civil war. We've been through 2 world wars. We've been through recessions, depressions, natural disasters, scandals of one kind or another. And somehow we've always found the leadership to get through it. And I think we will again, because I got to tell you, Mike, I think the real leadership of this country right now is not in Washington. The real leadership of this country is in communities across this country. I live on the Monterey Peninsula. This community pulls together. It's not Democrats or Republicans. It's Americans working together to take care of homeless, to take care of housing problems, to take care of food problems, to help people that are in need. And that's true across this country. That's where the strength of America really lies. It's in ordinary Americans who really exercise common sense and have a real spirit about what this country is about. That's what makes us strong. And frankly, I think that's the reason that no matter who the hell is president, this country is going to survive.
And Mr. Secretary, of course, last week we lost former Vice President Dick Cheney, someone whose legacy is very controversial. He was responsible. A lot of folks have put him as the face as Guantanamo Bay and a lot of the atrocities that took place there. But then he also had some redeeming moments when he stood up for democracy and endorsed the Democratic candidate for president because he did not want to cede democracy to someone who was going to trample on it like Donald Trump. What are your thoughts about former Vice President Cheney's legacy, and also Representative or Speaker Emeritus Nancy Pelosi, who just announced that she's retiring from Congress? She announced that in the aftermath of last Tuesday's off-year elections.
Well, I guess it makes my point that ultimately what we have in this country are people who are willing to stand up and do the right thing. They make their share of mistakes, but they're strong enough to believe in our Constitution and in the rule of law and in what the United States of America is all about. I've served with both Dick Cheney and Nancy Pelosi. And they both represent those qualities. I didn't always agree with Dick Cheney, but Dick Cheney believed deeply in national security. He believed deeply in the importance of defending our security and our freedom. And there's no question he may have made his share of mistakes, but when push comes to shove, the fact that he was able to stand up and say, I mean, he's a true Republican. He's a conservative Republican. For this strong public servant to stand up and say that that Donald Trump is wrong, in what he's doing, took tremendous courage. And his daughter, Liz Cheney, did the same thing. And it took tremendous courage, and they paid a price for it. But, God bless them for having the strength to do that, to stand up and say what they believe was right for this country. And Nancy Pelosi has did the same thing. She's somebody who I think was probably one of the best speakers we've had in the House. Why? Because she was willing to work the system, to push people, to raise the money that was necessary to be able to deal with the various people that are part of the House of Representatives, and ultimately to govern. That's what governing is all about. It's
Exactly.
being able to roll up your sleeves and really make people understand that they have to do the right thing. And Nancy was very good at that. She knew her caucus. She knew what she had to do. She believed in the right things for this country, and she fought like hell to make it happen, and provided tremendous leadership in doing that. So I think both of them represent individuals that we should honor.
Yeah.
Because in the end, despite whatever mistakes they may have made, they truly believed that our role is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, yeah, and you don't have to agree with me on this, but I've always found it fascinating that Cheney was more outspoken than his boss, George W. Bush. To me, I think he exhibited more courage. While Bush is painting pictures,
Yeah, no, he knew. I mean, he called it the way he saw it. I mean, he's a straight shooter. By the way, that's another trait that you need in good leadership is people who are willing to talk straight. You don't have to think twice about where the hell they stand. And that was true for Dick Cheney, and certainly was true for Nancy Pelosi.
And the last question I want to ask you, Secretary, before we go, as someone who's spent, your career at the highest levels of both intelligence and defense, what advice would you give young people, emerging national security leaders, who are idealistic, many of whom view the world through a lens of absolutes? You're either 100% good or 100% bad. They view compromise as not a win. They make perfect the enemy of the good. What advice would you give these young people who want to serve in national security and in the realm of national security, who are trying to reconcile domestic political realities with global strategic imperatives?
Yeah, it's what we teach here at the Panetta Institute. I want people to really be dedicated to public service, and I want young people, to understand that they have a role to play in our country. They've got to give something back to this country, and I really believe that it's important for them to understand what makes our democracy work or not work, and that it isn't about ideology, and it isn't about my way or the highway. It's about the ability to, yes, have your views, have your thoughts about what you think is right, but also listen to others, because we don't all have the right answers. You got to listen to others. You got to hear what their views are. And then you've got to try to work with others to build a consensus, to build a compromise. That's what our forefathers believed in. That's what this kept this country going. It's the fact that, yes, we have our different views. Yes, we have our differences. But we're willing to listen to one another, to trust one another, to respect one another, and to be able to work together to solve the problems facing this country. Young people need to understand that the fundamental role of public service is to make people's lives better. If you can make people's lives better, then you have served your democracy.
And forgive me, and I know I said that was the last question, but I'm dying to know your thoughts of Proposition 50 as a California resident yourself. And in light of the fact that you have a Republican Party that is making a surgical and intentional effort state by state, whether it was Texas, Mississippi, they're going into, Utah just rejected the proposed redrawn maps, but they're trying to make sure that they change who actually is able to choose their politicians, and doing this in the middle of the decade rather than at the end when the census is scheduled to take place.
I think the other thing I try to teach young people is that, our democracy works best when we trust in the institutions of our democracy, and we trust in each other. And if people are willing to run for election, the one thing they deserve is a free and fair election, and that people have the opportunity to vote for whoever they believe would be the right representative. Those are kind of fundamentals that help provide a foundation for our democracy. And when one party or one president thinks that he can virtually steal an election by somehow getting governors to redistrict and provide more members from one party than the other party and manipulate the system in that way, then it's wrong. It's wrong. It undermines our democracy. It doesn't strengthen our democracy. It undermines our democracy. And while I didn't particularly like the idea of California having to respond, there's no choice here. You've got to show that you can stand up to bullies.
Exactly.
And I hope there are enough brave people, frankly, in both parties, to be able to stand up to bullies.
Well, Secretary Panetta, thank you so much for your time, your candor, your decades of service. You are a true American hero. I always say, I don't think they did you justice by choosing James Gandolfini to represent you in the movies Zero Dark 30. You're much more nice and approachable than he is.
I thought they should have picked Al Pacino, but I'm glad they at least picked an Italian.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your wisdom and your conscience. I truly appreciate you. With that being said, that's going to conclude tonight's episode of the Political Mike Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in.
Good to be with you, pal. Take care.
Hi, it's Mike Taylor, the host of the Political Mike Podcast. If you like what you heard tonight, I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I also want to ask you to please follow along on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Amazon Music. You can also follow along and keep up with the conversation through our Telegram channel. Follow us on Twitter at @ThePollyMike, and follow us on Instagram. Thank you so much, and no matter what part of the political spectrum that you fall on, I want to encourage you to stay engaged, stay a part of the conversation, and stay informed. Thank you.